I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creepin' and crawlin'. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussin' and fightin', and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussin' and fightin', and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus. Good evening, Bowling Green, and hello to everyone listening or watching on the internet or Pacifica stations, wherever and whenever you may be. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my fantastic co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
And together, Rebecca and I are going to create for you an informative and hopeful hour of radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and families, of the earthworms and the robins and the falcons, and of the fungi and the fish, and pretty much everybody and everything else, because, like it or not, all of us are wrapped up together on this rapidly warming planet called Earth. We've got a great show for you today. It's pre-recorded, so you won't be able to call in, but you can text your comments to 419-973-5841, or send an email to joe@joedemare4agreenfuture.org on any environmental topic which has caught your attention or that you might want to know more about. We're always very happy to get feedback, especially now that we've been expanding to new stations on the Pacifica network. So we're just going to chat for another 10 minutes or so, and then we have an interesting interview with Jenny Morgan. Jenny is someone who did a deep dive into oil and gas well accidents in Ohio. She has come up with some startling information, including the fact that there's some sort of spill or accident about every day and a half.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That's
Not very hopeful news, but it needs to be publicly known. After talking with Jenny more about that, we'll be thanking our wonderfully empathetic patrons. And then it's time for Rebecca's segment. Rebecca, what will you be talking about this week?
I will be talking about yellow wood sorrel.
Excellent. Looking forward to that. After Rebecca's segment, it'll be ecological news from around the world. But in our own backyard, I'm happy to report that our garden is coming along nicely. We've got some green tomatoes, the beets and squash are growing well, and we've already harvested some nice, huge and juicy radishes. We had them in a salad that also contained some wild greens that are classically defined as weeds, but we also harvested from our garden. Specifically, we tossed the radishes that we grew in with violets and lamb's quarters leaves. The wild greens added some nice, intense flavors to the whole salad. Once you start really looking at the natural world and get to know the edible wild plants that can be foraged, you'll find it amazing that there's so much that nature just puts out there that we can eat or that provides medicinal benefits. In fact, nature can, and so far does, provide everything we need to live. While it's true we depend on intensive agriculture for our food, the soil the food grows in, the nutrients that our food plants need, and especially the water necessary for growing that food, those are all provided to us by nature. While nature can provide us with everything we need, it doesn't necessarily provide us with everything we want exactly when we want it. So we expend tremendous amounts of energy and resources forcing the world to give us what we want when we want it. Planting and growing a garden puts you more in tune with natural rhythms and cycles. You have to wait to plant most seeds until the danger of frost is past. Then you have to wait for your plants to grow. Radishes can be harvested in a few weeks, while tomatoes take a few months, etc.
And if you want your hot peppers to be really hot, apparently you have to starve them of water for the last week or something. We did not know this, so we had a bunch of jalapenos that you just didn't have too much flavor.
I have heard that. It's like they get angry at you for not watering them.
You got to make them mad.
Buff up their capacity.
I'm gonna hurt you now.
Peas have to be planted and harvested early because they can't take the heat.
Mm-hmm.
This idea of different foods being in season used to have an extremely important role in our diets, but now because of global trade, most foods are available year-round. Strawberries, watermelons, even cherries are grown on farms and plantations and in greenhouses all over the world and shipped to our own local supermarkets. It does seem like we have access to an endless and infinite abundance of fresh food all the time. If you only get your food from your local supermarket, it's more difficult to remember just how dependent we are on nature. But even there, you can be reminded if you pay attention. Florida oranges, for example, have just about disappeared from grocery shelves because of the greening disease. Eggs, for a while, were fantastically expensive because of the spread of bird flu and the bold commercial initiative of those farmers to collaborate to raise their prices. And in the near future, the price of beef may be increasing because of the screwworm epidemic. If you happen to go to your local farmer's market, that's also a good way to remember just how dependent we are on the natural world. Talking to the actual farmers who grow the food reminds us that good harvest depends on good weather and healthy soils. Our current fantasy of infinite resources is made possible by fossil fuels. Being able to burn oil as diesel or jet fuel allows us to ship in strawberries from Brazil or garlic from China in such huge quantities that it's somehow economical. In fact, food that's been shipped from halfway around the world is often cheaper for the consumer than the same kind of food grown only a few miles away. And we could ask ourselves why this is the case. Why do we import food that we know we're capable of growing inside the United States?
So we can plunk down giant data centers that take up like 4 farms. Is that why I need plants?
Yes, we're actualizing our potential profits by selling all that land. The farmers choose to plant soybeans and corn as opposed to resources, local vegetables that could be useful in their community. That answer is complicated, of course, but I think it's safe to say that it's a result of the policies of the government for the past 20 years, and those policies could easily be changed to support a larger variety of plants and vegetables accessible to their local communities as opposed to international. And we need to remember that our cheaper food does come with all kinds of hidden costs. A few weeks ago in our interview with Cassin Trenor from Sea Shepherd, we learned that krill from Antarctica were being shipped up to salmon farms in Norway near the Arctic Circle. The long-term hidden environmental costs of this is that the CO2 that is being pumped into the atmosphere. As the freighters laden with krill chug those 10,000 miles from one end of the Earth to the other, they're putting tons of carbon into the air. And when that salmon is then shipped to the United States to end up in the seafood department of your local supermarket, that also puts tons of CO2 into the air. Usually this quiet dumping of fossil fuels into the atmosphere goes unnoticed. The media will sometimes suddenly get concerned when there's a global warming enhanced disaster, like the current heat wave in Europe or a hurricane that rapidly develops from a level 1 to a level 5 because of the superheated ocean. But most of the time, we just watch the cars, trucks, and freighters going by without much concern. But sometimes something happens that shoves the whole sordid situation into our faces in a way that can't be ignored. The most recent example, of course, is the situation in the war with Iran. The Straits of Hormuz appear to be open again, but for weeks they were blockaded, and we saw just how dependent we are on fossil fuels as a society. Prices on everything from fertilizers to fish skyrocketed. Global economies were sent into tailspins, especially in countries which had to import oil for energy. Some countries have finally reacted to the situation rationally. That is, they have vowed to end their dependency of fossil fuels altogether. About 50 countries have signed on to the Santa Marta Agreement back in April, promising to transition to carbon-free economies. But while it's encouraging to see countries reacting so rationally, we've heard this story before. If we want to survive, we need to do more than react. We need to remember. There have been many other disasters that have presented an opportunity for us to realize the necessity of ending our dependency on fossil fuels. Some of those are in danger of fading from our memories. This is dangerous because without history, we can be manipulated crisis to crisis and lose ground as often as we gain it. One of these disasters that we should never forget was the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, also just called the Gulf oil spill. 16 years ago, a drilling rig in the Gulf of Mexico had a blowout, and millions of gallons of oil spewed into the ocean from deep underground for months. The entire country was engaged, partially because, for the first time, the actual accident was documented and live-streamed and televised. The image of oil spewing out of a well a mile underwater was mesmerizing. The oil was pushing up under tremendous pressure from a deposit that was 3 miles under the ocean floor.
It's like Satan's own lava lamp.
It gushed out for almost 3 months and created tremendous oil slicks on the surface. The Louisiana fishery, one of the most important on the planet at that time, was shut down for years, demonstrating how our addiction to fossil fuels actually threatens our food supply. Beaches were covered in tar. Millions of seabirds, fish, dolphins, and other sea creatures died, covered in oil. Entire communities were ruined financially, despite the billions BP paid in restitution. The problem is, we are relying more and more on AI and the web to remember for us, and the powers that be really want us to forget incidents like the Gulf oil spill. There was an engaging satirical video made at the time, a meme, if you will. It showed then President Obama walking hand in hand with the CEO of British Petroleum on a beach in the Gulf. At one point, Obama stops and flicks a cigarette into the oil-filled water, which immediately catches fire. The fire spreads over the Gulf, then over nearby cities, and then across North America, and finally it engulfs the whole planet, which then explodes. It was a perfect metaphor for what fossil fuels are doing to the world. This was before AI, well before, so it was all done with editing and splicing from news footage and disaster movies. We wanted to watch that video again to remind ourselves of the whimsy of the past, so we tried to find it on YouTube and other sites, but it was actually more difficult to find than we thought. We tried a couple different search terms, and none of them worked, although sometimes some thumbnails that YouTube displayed actually showed a screenshot from the correct video. All that we did find were the official Obama press releases of the time. Interestingly, we tried using Google AI and DeepSeek to find it. They were unable to, and Google actually confidently said that we had imagined the video. It claimed that in our memory, we were combining elements of 3 other similar videos that were released at that time, including a cartoon. But after being told directly that it was giving a false answer, Google AI admitted that the video did exist and was widely circulated at the time, but also said it was impossible to find today. If any of you listeners can find that video, or even if you only remember it, you can give us a text or contact us about it. We'd be grateful. This is another example where individual humans have to band together to save the parts of our culture and arts that we don't want simply deleted by AI or censored by AI or the people who control it. The point is that if we want to save the Earth, we have to remember what we're fighting and the times that we failed, so that we don't simply repeat the same mistakes over and over. After the Gulf oil spill, Obama doubled down on increasing drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. He also oversaw, with the help of then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, the creation of the global fracking industry. He took what should have been an opportunity to seriously start the world on a path towards a carbon-free, sustainable future, and then turned it into a disaster that continues to this day. The next year, he did exactly the same thing with the Fukushima nuclear disaster. What should have been the final nail in the coffin of a ridiculous, expensive, impractical industry was instead turned into a doubling down on the technology with tens of billions in taxpayer dollars. It's vitally important that we remember failed opportunities like those as the oil starts to flow from the Middle East again. Even though the tankers are now sailing through the Straits of Hormuz, we have to remember what happened when the oil was blocked and switch away from oil to renewable energy so that it never happens again. One of the things that we need to remember about the fossil fuel industry is that disasters like the Exxon Valdez or Deepwater Horizon oil spills are not isolated incidents. The history of the oil and gas industry is actually the story of a continuous series of spills, leaks, and explosions that are happening constantly out of sight. Our next guest, Jenny Morgan, took a deep, hard look at those accidents in the state of Ohio. Her research, primarily using requests from the Freedom of Information Act, as well as meticulous documentation, illustrates just how terrible the industry is in terms of safety and ecological damage. This is something we all need to remember as debates over energy policy continue. Let's go to that interview now.
Well, hello and welcome to For a Green Future. Could you please share with us your name and maybe your little bit of history as a activist?
Sure. Thanks, Joe, for having me. My name is Jenny Morgan. I've been an independent activist since about 2011 when Ohio first started pondering fracking our state parks. And I got involved heavily then. I got involved very heavily in the issue of brine spreading, oil and gas brine spreading on our roads. I also am a singer-songwriter, so I got involved writing songs and performing at rallies. And eventually I joined the Ohio Brine Task Force, which is through the Buckeye Environmental Network. And I also was on the board of Save Ohio Parks.
So you've been at it for a while. And you were actually recommended by a friend of the show there, Kathy Cohen Becker, because she made a post about an accident, a recent accident, a little bit of an explosion there. And do you have any more information about that?
only what I have seen on some TV reporting, I think. It looked like it was some sort of well explosion, and a woman was being interviewed who lived nearby, and her yard and her pool and everything was covered with, residue, probably oil or probably brine shooting out of the well. And so I saw pictures, and it was shooting very high in the air and covering everything around. Very disturbing.
So this is hardly an isolated incident, though, right? I mean, you've been studying these accidents and explosions for quite a while. How often do they happen?
Well, when I did a public record request back in, I think it must have been the end of 2023, I found that the ODNR files, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, which is the regulator for oil and gas, they had about 250 incidents filed a year. So I think that averages to about an incident or accident every day and a half.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot of accidents.
And Joe, I'd say also, pardon me, but I'd say that's just what's called in. And that's specific to what ODNR regulates as far as incidents. I mean, if there's a incident at a refinery, that is not filed with ODNR. If there's an incident with a pipeline accident, that also does not go in that file. So ODNR, as I understand it, pretty much regulates well sites. So these would be accidents at well sites. They also will cover when there's a truck carrying brine waste and it wrecks, then that's also in the file. So, it doesn't cover what's not called in. It doesn't cover when someone's doing something improper, like dumping. It doesn't cover refinery pipelines. So even though it's an accident or incident every day and a half, there's much more.
Okay, so yeah, so something's happening all the time. Do you recall any specific examples from some of the files you've looked at?
There's so many, and as I said before we got on, I've been doing something called, I started a daily accident report, Ohio Oil and Gas. And I was working vigorously on that every day, spending probably 6 to 8 hours a day researching an incident and then writing about it. So hence daily accident report. So I pretty much started that in June of 2024 and went through 2025. So I worked on it about a year, but I have not been doing that for about whatever it's been now, 8 months or maybe even a year now. So the incidents aren't at the top of my mind, but some that I recall, there was a brine accident that contaminated a reservoir in Barnesville, and it was
that's a drinking reservoir?
Drinking water reservoir, yes. And it was about 5,000 gallons of brine, which many don't know contains radium, among many other things. And it contaminated the reservoir, which was 90 million gallons of water. And it went offline for about 2.5 to 3 months. So just that much brine contaminated that much water for that long. So it's very concerning. There was another one that there was a well in Bainbridge, Ohio, Cleveland Bainbridge, not the one in Southern Ohio, and the cement failed in the well, and it was a very serious water contamination issue. So that's well documented, and anybody can look that up.
So
Look at
the
those two
water, you mean surrounding wells, surrounding streams,
surrounding drinking water.
surrounding drinking water.
Mm,
So, so we're literally seeing,
Very serious.
yeah, so we're literally seeing our drinking water, and they say water is life, and certainly without it, we wouldn't be here, being sacrificed to the oil and gas industry.
Yes, it's very concerning. I mean, there's examples all over the country. Pennsylvania, Texas, Oklahoma. I mean, it's yeah, and it's well documented. And the EPA, they all, it can contaminate whether you have spills on the surface that percolate down into the groundwater and the drinking water, whether you have like the brine truck spilling on the road, going into a stream, then going into a drinking reservoir. So, it's very serious.
So, the ecological effects of this brine, I mean, you mentioned radon, but it also would have some direct environmental effects, right? I mean, beyond just making the drinking water undrinkable, does it harm wildlife? Does it harm insect populations?
You said radon, and if I said radon, I misspoke. It's radium 226 and 228. So yeah, a lot of people don't know. Most people don't know that when they drill for oil and gas, they go down into the shale, Marcellus Shale in particular here in Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. And that shale contains uranium, and radium degrades from uranium. And so when that rock when they shoot down the water, millions and millions of gallons to fracture the rock, then that uranium is released, or the radium is released, and it comes up when the water comes back up, which there is a lot of water that shoots back up, that is contaminated with radium 226 and 228. Again, well documented. And that comes up and has to be, it's really unbelievable. It has to be carried away by brine trucks because it's so contaminated. Again, with radium, but all the chemicals that they've used to frack the well, and other heavy metals that are in the earth. And that has to be trucked away, truckload by truckload by truckload, because it is so contaminated. It's radioactive, and it has to be carried to other wells that are called Class 2 injection wells, which then it's injected into the injection wells, but it's not a closed well. It's actually just something, a steel well that goes down a certain amount past the groundwater into a geological formation under the ground, and that's where it is, quote unquote, stored. But as we know, these injection wells or the formations can fracture, and that contaminated waste can go here and there and even upward. And it has done so in Athens and Washington County in Ohio. And it has even contaminated, as you may know, wells where gas and oil owners' product has been contaminated by this waste. And that's caused just an uproar in southern Ohio, let alone shooting out of, unplugged wells that are old. The waste will travel, and then whatever pressure is happening because of X, Y, and Z, it shoots up some, abandoned well, and this contaminated radioactive waste is shooting out of these holes. Again, this is well documented, and you can Google it. You can, see these incidents.
And not to mention an earthquake or two caused by the injection.
Yes, and that's also well documented. Sure, right.
Well, we just this is just asking your opinion on this next question. I think I can guess your answer, but what do you think of the proposal sitting on the governor's desk to open our state parks to oil and gas drilling?
Well, as I said, I was on the board of Save Ohio Parks for a while, and and I'm also a founder of a group called Leave No Child Inside, not behind, but inside. Mm-hmm. And I started that group in 2007 to help get children connected or reconnected with the natural world, because really strong research shows that nature is critical for children's healthy development, preferably outdoor, unstructured play in nature. So our parks and our natural spaces are so important for our children, for everyone's mental health, physical health. So to think that Ohio is opening our parks to this mess, to these pollutants, air pollutants, these incidents that happen this often, is heartbreaking to me. And, you know, as you know, Joe, they have been fracking our parks underneath our parks already. So to think that, you know, and they promised, we won't put the rigs on the parks. We won't put the rigs on the park land. Well, looky here. We knew that was going to happen. So it's heartbreaking. Everyone should be concerned that loves parks. I mean, we do not want this in our parks around our children. It's heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm. So where can people see the daily accident report if they want to go back and read some of these accounts for themselves?
They can do so on Facebook. Just put in daily accident report. And I've done 101 thus far. It really, I think I'd like to get back to it, Joe, but it really, it really, I think, took a toll to read these incidents day in and day out. And, you know, just sitting that long for one, but also mentally, just looking at the insanity day in and day out I needed to take a break, and I've taken a break. But they can read about these incidents. Some of them are longer than others, my reports. And it tells a story. And, you know, I think the one thing that concerns me so much is that the response when I and other activists bring up the frequency of these incidents and accidents is, oh, they're just minor. They're just minor. And which they are, Joe, listed in the ODNR files, many of them as minor, quote unquote. But if you read the reports that I've done, you will see that they are not minor. And I can't for the life of me figure out why ODNR is calling them minor. People can judge for themselves when they read the information.
All righty. So I'm guessing you are in favor of basically our whole society getting off the whole fossil fuel thing as soon as possible.
Yes, please. I have no energy source is perfect, but when you compare, and I'm not an expert, I couldn't do a dissertation on all of this, but what I do know is the contamination of oil and gas drilling, storing this core of waste and everything else, trucking it, the incidents. There's a much better way that would be cleaner and healthier. So yes, please, as soon as possible.
All right. Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think just to give people an idea of how the incidents and accidents are called in and how that all came about. I wonder if I could just talk about that a bit. So in 2016, Governor Kasich passed an executive order called 2016-04K, if people want to look that up. And this kind of hydrofracking where they go deeper and deeper and horizontally drilling really kind of came into Ohio around 2011, as I understand. So if you read this executive order, you will see that CASIC declares kind of a state of emergency because, from what I've inferred by reading it, is that there were so many things happening, incident and accident wise, that they needed to put in this system for people to call in these incidents and accidents. So before that, and as your readers or listeners know, I mean, drilling for gas and oil started in Ohio a long time ago, in the 1800s. So all of this waste that was this radioactive waste, gas and oil waste, this was all happening all this time. So in 2016, CASIC, finally, someone put something in place where if there was some sort of spill or gas explosion or brine truck that spilled all this waste on the roads and in a reservoir, they had a system for people to call it in. And those incidents have to be called in within 30 minutes because, as he says in his executive order, it's so critical to get to these incidents and accidents quickly. And so that's called into the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. And that is what the file where I read the 250 incidents, accidents a year that are called in are logged. And so that's how that all came about.
Wow. All right. Thank you, Jenny. That was our interview with Jenny Morgan talking about oil and gas industry accidents here in Ohio. If you had any comments about that interview, or if you've experienced an oil or gas accident in your own backyard, tell us about it. You can give us a text at 419-973-5841. You can leave us an email at joe@joedemare4agreenfuture.org, or you can find us on social media. Now it's time for us to thank our patrons. Our patrons are wonderful people, compassionate and intelligent, the kind of people other people would like to be like. It's pretty easy to become one of them. All they did was go to patreon.com, that's patreon.com. There they searched for a Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page. They found a membership level that matched their budget, and they signed up. Now a little bit comes out of their account each month and comes over to us, and that's how we can afford to keep this show on the air. So thank you to our patrons. Now it's Rebecca's turn on the mic. All right, Rebecca, it's time for your segment. What would you like to talk to us about today?
Okay, well, another plant in my neighborhood, and maybe yours, which I'm going to talk about today, is yellow wood sorrel, which it's actually one of my childhood plants, too. The first wood sorrel I ever ran across was in western Kentucky, because our landlord, in the first house we had there, which was this giant, this little tiny ranch duplex in the middle of a lawn the size of a golf course, which my dad had a mow. He really hated that. And it had one tree. It had exactly one tree in the whole place. But yeah, he planted a bunch of pink wood sorrel, which he told me were like, around the foundation of the house as a an ornamental plant. And I guess Mr. Boyd was an old farm boy, so he knew a little bit about plants against his will, Mostly he just felt like organic farming was very wrong and he needed to be stopped. But yeah.
That's interesting. So he liked the chemicals then.
He did, but he also liked pink wood sorrel. So like he was introduced to me as sour clover. I guess that's the thing. People call it that. And I had a little bit of it. I think I was like 9 then. And I thought it was neat. And then when we moved back up north again, people told me that the yellow plant I was seeing everywhere, which was like smaller and had little yellow blossoms, was also called sour clover, and that turned out to be yellow wood sorrel. And there's still some of it in my yard. The Latin name is Oxalis stricta. and it's known for its citrusy taste. It has like kind of a, not really lemon, it's a little bit sweet too. It's not overpowering like lemon, but it has a nice little taste, and it contains oxalic acid, which is why it is poisonous.
Oh,
Well, you have to. I would like I would still like to find a definition on how much you can eat, because it's edible, but don't go eating just that for a week or something. It would be bad. You probably won't want to do that.
various diets.
So yeah, before you throw some on your salad, just maybe look that up. So to be on the safe side. But yeah, in its concentrated form, it's very popular as a rust and stain remover. So, it has these cute little yellow flowers and leaves which fold downward when there's no sun, or also when there's drought. So in response to stress, like they have these little clover leaves, and they do this, like they fold neatly downward along the crease in the middle. I've seen them do this.
Yeah.
I didn't know that
Sounds
because they
cool.
were stressed out. Yeah. And they have the little bright yellow 5-petal flowers, and the leaves look a lot like clover leaves. They look like 3-leaf clovers. And this is interesting. I'm going to have to look more closely because I've never seen this personally. Apparently, they have very elongated okra seed capsule, or okra-like seed capsules, which can shoot up to either 15 or 16, can shoot their seeds 15 or 16 feet when they're disturbed. So you kind of like to see that.
Similar to violets, then.
Really?
That is the same kind of popping evolutionary tactic to
Yeah.
spread themselves.
Yeah, they also they have a shallow taproot plus rhizomes, like horizontal stems under the soil. And if eating too much of, they're bad for kidney stones, gouts, and rheumatoid arthritis. And they can be discouraged pretty easily by mulch in seed beds, if that's where you want to get them out, because they need like the sunlight to actually kind of get the dirt. So yeah, benefits would be they're an early pollinator food source. They shelter small invertebrates. They stabilize disturbed soil and prevent like a lot of water running, because there's something that water has to go. It's just sort of acting like a slowing things down, living filter, that kind of thing. And also they provide food for small mammals, native birds, deer, and rabbits. And they're native to North America and East Asia, areas of East Asia, naturalized in Europe, Africa, and New Zealand. Apparently naturalized has just been like, well, they've been here for a while. They're not doing that much harm.
Something figured out how to eat them.
Right, yeah, exactly. Drawbacks would be they can take water, and they can outcompete in certain areas native plants for water and light, which can be bad. They're toxic to livestock if you grow them in large quantities. If there's a bunch of them, the livestock will just keep eating until they do eat too much. And they're a vector for crop diseases, including rust fungi. And they're not really a great nitrogen fixer like clover is, for example. So if they're out competing regular clover, you might get less light nitrogen, And yeah, so and then apparently the plant that it's pinkwood sorrel was the plant that I knew it was in Kentucky. Yeah.
So they are edible.
Yeah.
Is that just raw? Like you can just pick
Yeah.
them and eat them, not boiled or anything. Interesting.
Yeah, you just kind of run them under the tap, maybe.
So it could be a source for foraging in a pinch. It
Right.
sounds like.
Yeah, or if you sprinkle some on your salad, if you've got other greens, it should be all right.
All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
And now it's time for Ecological News. Well, we said at the top of the hour this show would inspire some hope. Our first story is good news. This is from the New York Times from June 18th. The title is Trump Administration Backs Off Plan to End Ocean Monitoring. A few weeks ago, we told you about how Trump was removing a network of ocean buoys that measured a whole host of parameters: temperature, pH, flow direction and speed, chemical composition, and more. Well, obviously he was embarrassed by our coverage and has reversed his position. Trump was planning to spend tens of millions of dollars ripping up the buoys with not even a plan to store them. The whole system cost over $300 million and was scheduled to run until 2050, but it was most likely all headed for the scrap heap. For the Trump administration, which officially maintains the outrageous fiction that global warming isn't real, the temperature readings were the biggest problem. Those temperature records clearly show that global warming is happening and at an accelerating rate, so the buoys had to go. It's hard to maintain a bald-faced lie like that when your own National Science Foundation's data is proving every day that you are lying. The data from the buoys is also used for things like hurricane forecasting. The temperature and water flow information is fed directly into the computer models scientists use to predict weather patterns and other specifics like which direction and how strong hurricanes will be. For the population of the southern coastal states, this information is absolutely vital. When hurricanes hit the coasts, people and businesses have to know how strong and what direction the hurricanes will be from. Fishermen also use the data to know where they can safely pilot their fishing boats. Alaskan fishermen were especially angry because having that data could literally be the difference between life and death in the incredibly volatile and dangerous waters off our far northwest coast. So, the Senate unanimously passed a bill restoring the system. The Trump administration was already acting illegally in attempting to dismantle it because Congress had specifically allocated funding for it into the last 2 budgets. Trump was facing a unanimous Senate that passed a specific law aimed at overturning his specific executive orders. In the House, only the most sycophantic congresspeople, like Ohio's Bob Latta, were predicted to vote with the president. That meant the law restoring funding was very likely to pass with enough votes to override any presidential veto. Trump isn't quite ready to blatantly defy Congress yet, so the NSF has announced it is reversing the planned dismantling. Right now, some of the buoys off the coast of Oregon have already been removed. Those will take about a year to replace, but at least for today, science triumphs over intentional ignorance. For our next story, we travel down to the bottom of the Earth. There is an incredible Antarctic heat wave going on right now, and it has been going for the entire month of June. For this story, we drew on a June 19th video on the YouTube channel of a climate scientist named Dr. Ella Glibbs, and a June 24th article on the website of the British Antarctic Survey. Essentially, even though this is supposed to be the coldest time of the year, during the middle of the Antarctic winter, temperatures are about 50 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. This is despite the fact that most of the continent is in 24-hour darkness. Rain is falling instead of snow. Glaciers are melting at an incredible rate, and sea ice simply isn't forming. This is disrupting the entire Antarctic ecosystem because algae growing on the underside of sea ice is literally the foundation of most food chains down there. The temperature has been above freezing every day for all of June. Most of the highest temperatures are happening on the Antarctic Peninsula, the northernmost part of the continent, but the whole continent is having what will probably turn out to be the warmest winter since records started being kept over 50 years ago. June is supposed to be the peak month for Antarctic sea ice. Instead, the current measurements differs from the normal projections by an area the size of France. Almost 250,000 square miles of ice is completely missing. Sea ice helps keep atmospheric temperatures low, reflecting sunlight back out into space, and pre-cooling air blowing off the oceans before it reaches the continent. And also, instead of being reflected, solar energy is now being absorbed by the ocean. This is part of the global warming positive feedback loop. More heat means less ice, which means more heat, which means less sea ice, etc. Penguin populations are crashing, which is something we've mentioned on the show before, and the glaciers on the land are imperiled. The Thwaites Glacier is being held in place by the sea ice. If all the sea ice melts over the next few decades, Thwaites will crash into the ocean, raising global sea levels by about 10 feet. That would be bad. Our next story comes to us from sunny California in the form of a press release from Californian Congressperson John Garamendi. Costco stores in Fresno County in California were found to be selling grapevines infected with an insect called the glassy winged sharpshooter. Glassy winged sharpshooters are extra large leaf hoppers. Interesting, they are actually native to the southwest United States and northern Mexico, but the Rocky Mountains have generally kept them from California. That's good for California's wine industry because the glassy winged sharpshooter, GWSS, carry a bacteria that causes Pierce's disease that kills grapevines. A group of Californian congresspeople are requesting emergency funds from the federal government to fight the outbreak. At stake is California's $120 billion wine industry that employs more than 1 million people. There have been small outbreaks before that were contained, but this time many people seem to have bought the infected grapevines, potentially spreading GWSS over the entire region. We're reporting on this story because it's something that happens over and over again. Importing destructive pests, whether it's insects or fish or just mollusks like zebra mussels, any or all of them can cause economic damage in the billions. Because Costco was trying to make a few $1,000s in profits, it could be wiping out the wine industry worth billions. What we talked about at the start of the show, that our entire economic system is dependent on nature, should be taught in every economics class. The original Costco supplier who purchased the infected plants should have known that plants grown in places like Arizona could have a pest that could destroy ecosystems in California. Most likely, they were completely ignorant and made their purchasing decisions based solely on price and deliverability. How many times do we have to see this pattern repeated before we understand that importing biologicals from other countries, or even local areas like this, in this case, has the potential to wipe out our ecosystems? The emerald ash borers that came over on pallets from China, the fungal disease that wiped out the American chestnut. Over and over, nature has tried to teach us the folly of putting economics above ecology, when economics are completely dependent on ecology. We can and must do better. But, of course, as we reported a few weeks ago, the Trump administration, through DOGE, fired the 400 inspectors that protected us from invasive species from other countries. While they did then scramble desperately to hire some back, we are more vulnerable than ever before. For our next story, we're off to Canada. Ontario's premier is the controversial Doug Ford, head of the Liberal Conservative Party. A little note, if your political party's name is an oxymoron, you're probably in the wrong party. Ford has announced that the future of Ontario's energy will be nuclear. In fact, he has already spent hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars dismantling installed and functioning wind turbines. He makes a great deal of political gains by defying President Trump publicly, but on policy, he's exactly the same, trying to quash wind and solar while encouraging fossil and nuclear. The group Environmental Defense, spelled with a C, just released a report on their website, environmentaldefense.ca, entitled The Real Cost of Ontario's Nuclear Gamble, How Ontario's Nuclear Plan Could Cost Ratepayers $117 billion more than renewable energy. Ford's plan to increase the number of nuke plants would require $221 billion in capital investments by 2050 if it proceeds on time and under budget. The problem, of course, is that no nuclear plant in history has ever been delivered on time and under budget. That's worth repeating because it really emphasizes the folly of blindly trusting the promises of, quote, free, clean energy. No nuclear plant in the past 6 years has been delivered on time and under budget. The report says that the same amount of electricity could be generated using renewables for less than half the amount, about $104 billion. Wind and solar farms are routinely finished on budget and often ahead of schedule. Environmental Defense calculates that trying to go nuclear will increase electric bills for Ontarians by about 500 Canadian per year. But again, that's if it goes according to plan. Final nuclear costs are usually about double, but sometimes are as much as 10 times the original estimates. That is, if the proposed nuclear plant actually ever comes online. The nuclear plants, even the ones where construction is started, are never actually finished because the economics make no sense. When such large numbers, billions of dollars, are being thrown around, it's very easy for companies to take that capital and then string along their investors for years. And we've seen that happen every single time. The plan moving forward is to build gas plants for the short term as the nuclear plants are being built. By 2050, Ontario expects to be getting 70% of its electricity from nuclear. But in addition to putting deadly CO2 into the atmosphere, the price of running plants on natural gas is fluctuating wildly as unforeseen events like the Iran war put pressure on global supply. Also, nuclear plants are increasingly failing in this warming world. The Golfec plant in France had to shut down this past week because the river that it draws its cooling water from is too hot to cool the plant. So, just when power is needed the most, nukes fail. Parts of the French grid are failing during their incredible record June heat wave, and dropping the gigawatts of power generated by nuclear plants with little notice poses a grave threat to the grid. In addition to uninterruptible locally generated power, renewables offer pricing certainty. Once the capital costs of building them are done, there's no additional fuel costs, minimal and predictable maintenance costs, and price certainty. That's another reason solar and wind are by far the fastest growing energy sources across the last decade. So, to illustrate that, for our final story, we are going to Utah. A June 24th story on the website Electrek is titled, Utah's largest solar plus battery storage project is officially online. The Green River Energy Center in Emery County is a $1.1 billion project being run by the company R Plus Energies. We also drew on a story by KSL.com titled Utah's largest solar battery farm now online in Emery County. Almost 1 million solar panels, plus about 500 Tesla Megapack batteries, makes the plant the largest in the Pacific Corp's service area, which includes Oregon, Washington, California, Utah, Wyoming, and Idaho. Utah is expanding its generation capacity through something called Operation Gigawatt. The plan is to double its generation. Right now, the plan calls for most of that to be from nuclear power plants, but solar is so practical, economical, and quick that it's likely it'll fill all the generation needs long before any nuke plant is finished. In fact, the entire Green River project took less than 2 years to build, from groundbreaking to grid connection. The Green River project alone will provide 400 megawatts of solar power, and the battery bank can store 1.6 gigawatt hours of power. That means the batteries alone will be capable of providing more power than a nuclear plant for over an hour with only a fraction of a second's notice. It's also generating $55 million a year in taxes and is donating scholarships to local schools and direct subsidies to local fire departments. And keep in mind, this is happening in Utah, a deeply conservative state. This is showing that even in many red states, the practicality and economics of renewables is winning out. When we started this show 7 years ago, A 400 megawatt solar field with 1.6 gigawatt hours of battery backup was almost unimaginable. The speed at which renewable energy has scaled up and has become commonplace is breathtaking.
Now, a project this size barely makes it past local news agencies. And that's why we wanted to finish with this story. This transition is happening. All over the world, wind, solar, and battery projects are going up at a breakneck pace, despite Trump and the dirty energy industry's best attempts to stop it. The fact that this is considered a minor story is actually a tremendous sense of hope for the future. And our show is all about that green future, a future where we actually figure out how to live with the planet instead of just on the planet. Maybe once we figure that out, we'll be ready to explore other planets as well. In the meantime, keep listening to For a Green Future. If you want to make your voice heard, you can send text to 419-973-5841. Send us an email at joe@joedemare4agreenfuture.org or find us on social media. We'll be back next week. This is Joe DeMare signing off.
I don't want no oil, a spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting,